Hey, welcome back to Pulp Hero Audio. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what makes a man, specifically as it relates to Robert E. Howard's Conan story, Rogues in the House, that was originally published in Weird Tales magazine back in January of 1934. So, we're talking about men here. And in Rogues in the House, we have 4 men of note. There is, of course, Conan, our barbarian main character. And it will be Conan's perspective or worldview that will drive this topic of discussion and how we look at masculinity in this case. Then we also have Murillo, the young aristocrat. We also have Nabonidus, the red priest. And finally we have Thak, the man-ape. Now, Conan is, of course, a very manly sort of man. He's clearly Howard's model of everything a man should be, or at least what Howard thinks a man should be. So, it's the way that Conan reacts to and interprets the events of this story that will really inform this topic of manliness, which I think you'll see taps directly into Howard's reoccurring theme of civilization versus barbarism, which you will find in most of his Conan work. So, as we go on to our next character, Murillo, I think, is rather interesting. Murillo, he's obviously civilized. Hopefully you can hear the air quotes there. Murillo is civilized and an aristocrat at that, among the rich, the well-off. But Murillo is not like a lot of characters of this ilk that we sometimes see in work like this. Murillo has some genuinely strong moments. I mean, Howard initially describes Murillo in Rogues in the House as, quote, "for all his scented black curls and foppish apparel, was no weakling." Okay, so Murillo was not a weakling by Howard's description. And I think this can be seen in the risks that we see Murillo take in the story, from his hiring of Conan and arranging his escape from the dungeon. And then when he thinks that that plan has failed, Murillo goes to the house of Nabonidus in person to kill the priest himself. And it's even Murillo who, bashes Thak the man-ape with a chair at a very critical moment, allowing Conan to finally slay the beast. You might even go as far as to say that without Murillo, Conan might have lost his battle with Thak. Now, Murillo also seems to be a man of his word, which would go into Conan's idea of proper behavior for a man of his word. And finally, I think it's of note that Murillo actually survives this tale. At the end of the story, Murillo is still among the living, which I think speaks a lot for him. So Murillo is definitely a man. But he's a man who is, like a lot of us in the real world, he's caught in the trappings of civilization. And that has sort of diluted the essence of his manly nature, if you will. Now, Conan doesn't treat Murillo disrespectfully. It's not like he treats him like he's less than a man or anything. But neither is he complimentary toward Murillo. Conan doesn't even offer him a bit of gratitude, for the assist that he offered with Thak. Now, perhaps in Conan's mind, that's simply what a man would do in that situation. So thanks are not really necessary for doing what, Conan sees ought to simply be natural for a man in that situation. So next we have Nabonidus, the Red Priest, another obviously civilized man. And the thing that stands out about Nabonidus, I should say, is he's a very highly intelligent man. Nabonidus is pretty much a genius of his age, described as being, centuries ahead in his thinking and scientific discoveries. Yet, Conan doesn't seem remotely impressed with any of this or the Red Priest himself. Conan just chalks up all of the man's amazing inventions as it's witchcraft, And then, of course, at the end of the story, he crushes the man's great brain with a simple, well-aimed, and hard-thrown stool. So, for all his intelligence, Nabonidus died rather quickly and virtually without a struggle. I mean, there really wasn't any sort of a fight put up by Nabonidus. And Conan just declares that his blood was red after all. So, at the end of the day, Nabonidus was just a man, and an ordinary one at that, by Conan's standards. To Conan, Nabonidus wasn't anything special as a man. Even though he might have been some kind of Tesla or Edison or Einstein of the Hyborian age, none of that really impressed Conan. None of that really made an impression on Conan as far as the masculine nature of Nabonidus. So, our final character then among our men of note would be Thak. Now, some might argue that, Thak wasn't even, a man at all. He was an ape. He was a beast. So, Thak, I think, taps directly into what seems to me to be Howard's fascination with the concept of alleged kinship between man and beast, the civilized and the primitive, and Howard's whole notion that one can slide between one and the other. Just as a beast can rise to manhood or some approximation thereof, so too can man descend back into the primitive savagery of the beast, almost like it's kind of a sliding scale sort of thing. Now, of course, with Thak, after Conan's battle with this, ferocious beast man, we have, Conan's famous declaration, that I have slain a man tonight, not a beast. I will count him among the chiefs whose souls I've sent into the dark, and my women will sing of him. All right, so what was it about Thak that impressed the Sumerian so much? What was it? His, human-like intelligence and cleverness? That certainly didn't seem to do much where Nabonidus was concerned. Was it his donning of human clothes? Was it Thak's ability to remember so much of what he had seen of Nabonidus when it came to working the machines and the traps of the house? No. Conan didn't care about any of that stuff. So what made Thak a man in Conan's eyes, simply seems to be how hard Thak fought. You know, the kind of fierce opponent he was. You know, how fiercely Thak clung to life, all while trying to end the life of his opponent, you know, that being Conan. So it's these things that seems to have earned Conan's respect as a man for another man. Now, I do think it's sadly ironic that this man-ape, you know, fighting so fiercely for his life while Conan was doing the same, you know, this was written by a man who would tragically take his own life. And, you know, and I'm not speaking in a derogatory manner whatsoever about Robert E. Howard, you know, as to what was going through his mind and that kind of thing at that moment. But I think it goes to the idea, to my belief anyway, that Conan was every bit as much a fantasy for his creator as he is supposed to be for his reader. Conan, and by extension, you know, Thak, they possess many of the traits that I believe Howard himself wanted to embody. You know, Conan is the man he wanted to be. So, you know, Conan was as much, I think, and this is totally my opinion, although others may share it, Conan was as much Robert E. Howard's fantasy as he is ours. So, to sum up some final thoughts on Rogues in the House, I know it is counted as a favorite among a lot of Howard fans. And I too like it. I even love parts of it. But there are, for me anyway, there are other Howard Conan stories that I love more than Rogues in the House. Now, I do love the whole dungeon escape sequence, and Conan's encounter with the girl who betrayed him, you know, when he chunks her into a cesspool. And then, of course, there's the final battle with Thak. That is fantastic. But for me, some of the middle bits of Rogues in the House, it kind of drags a bit. At one point, it sort of turns into the Nabonidus and Murillo show, filled with lots of exposition, as, you know, these two guys are blathering back and forth, and it's almost like they're watching a Thak movie of sorts on the Red Priest's network of mirrors. And, you know, what's Conan doing during all this? Well, nothing. Conan's just kind of standing there doing nothing. You know, he seems almost kind of useless at one point in the story, just occasionally grunting a brief comment here and there. So I guess those are my criticisms, if any, although there are definitely lots of this story that I do love and enjoy. But hey, that's just one man's opinion. Let me know in the comments what you think of Rogues in the House, or anything I've had to say here. Please like, subscribe. And if you haven't read this particular Howard yarn, or maybe it's been a while, you can find an audio recording of it on this very channel. So, until next time, later.